everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Untold Truth. Tonight is a very special night because it is the 27th of April in South Africa, and we are celebrating Freedom Day. And why are we celebrating Freedom Day? Because the person we are interviewing tonight and these forefathers decided that we shouldn't be free. And that is how serious this conversation is tonight. We are getting straight into it with Schalk van Heerden, with Betereinders on the book that he has written. And we're going to be discussing everything that's important and amazing about South Africa tonight. And I would like to introduce you to Mr. Schalk van Heerden. Schalk, how's it?
Yeah, lekker Edwin. Thank you for the very kind and gracious introduction to me and my people. I'm here in the Cape. I'm from Joburg, but I'm in the Cape, and what I'm seeing around me is 27 April. For 80% of the country is more like April Fool's Day, if you have to celebrate your freedom. So for 10%, it's lovely. But the others are confused, 27 and 1 April, not making sure who's the fool and who's free. And maybe we'll get into that tonight.
Yeah, well, as you can hear, my guest tonight, Mr. Schalk, he's not here to give you good feelings and good vibes. We are here to speak the untold truth, whether you like it or not. And he's bringing us a conversation through his life journey in this book. But he also gives us the honest truth about what it's like to be white Afrikaner living in South Africa and not wanting to see the boundaries that have been set up by apartheid and the people that and the group of people which ideology and identity he holds in this country. So we don't have a lot of time. These things always go so quickly. So we're not going to waste any time. Scott, I think the most important question before we start any conversation uh, um, with you and with this is just to ask you straightforward, are you a whitey?
Yeah, look, whitey is better than being a Southie, So um, I'm very white. I won't run away from that. So I'm not sure what it means to be a whitey. Um, let me be controversial and make you angry, Edwin. I'm not going to make the listeners angry. I'm going to make you angry. Why I know it's a confusing question is I'm very aware because whenever I walk into a place, people don't see Schalk. In a village, in a city, wherever, they see a white guy first. And then maybe after a year or 5 years, they'll see Schalk. But I represent white history wherever I walk in, and I had to make peace with that a long time ago. But then maybe 200 times in my life, people, strangers or friends, have said to me, yeah, Schalk, you're so black. Now, I know that irritates black people because I'm obviously not black. I don't know anything about black pain, blah, blah, blah. But why I maybe want to be arrogant and mention that play of words is I'm white, but we can decide how white we are in the sense of how much we learn, how arrogant we are, who we respect or not respect. So definitely a whitey, and I must deal with that every day. But maybe I'm a whitey trying to go a bit deeper and further, and then playfully, I can become. I always want to stay a whitey, but not that type of whitey. So yeah, so I'm not running away from that, and I can never make as if I'm, I can't make rasta hair and act as if I'm black. I'm not one of those types. I like biltong and conservative Afrikaans music, and I read an Afrikaans Bible. So I'm a whitey. I'm definitely a whitey and an Afrikaans whitey. And we'll see more about it tonight. But
Okay,
that's such a good question. I don't know what's following that one.
that's a good question. Now we gonna get into the softer side of life, where we gonna want to know a little bit more about Schalk. You wrote this book, so why write the book, and what was the purpose behind writing this book for you?
Hmm. Quick answer is I was asked to write it. I wasn't sitting at home with ambitions of writing a book because it's such a contradiction and attention for a white person dealing with poverty and racism to now put your face on a book and write a book and go on a book tour. In a way, it's torture. So it wasn't my plan. Why I said yes to the project, the writing the book was quick 6 months, but it's like I only wrote about what I live. And so in that sense, it took 40 years. But why I said yes is it feels to me that in our country, we're stuck. And mostly I think we're stuck because of words. People from both sides get triggered on the wrong meanings and words. And we're not moving, I think we're not moving necessarily closer to each other. And there's stuckness, even of people with good intentions and good hearts. Fewer and fewer people are showing up for the conversation. If we had this Zoom 20 years ago, there'll be hundreds of people talking and wanting to know. Now everyone's tired of it. Even the ones that's never done anything think they're tired already. And we're drifting apart. So with my book, and why I wrote the book is in the comfort of your own toilet. You can read it. Yeah, maybe a different way of framing things. And then if you still want to dismiss it, you're welcome. But I hope that the book, like a bit of my life, can be a bridge for people to either find each other or to move along the journey a little bit. But yeah, so it's a maybe my book is like a prayer of of reconciliation, in a sense, of people getting back into the very important work that's not a luxury but a necessity.
Mm. And that's important because what you're highlighting, I've also picked up. Even during COVID, there was a lot of people looking for content, and they would come and flock to this type of session. But since it has dried up, so less and less people are coming, and it's more difficult to go and get those people so that they can listen to this important conversation that we're having. And I think for us, whether they show up or not, I think it shouldn't stop the conversation. We will continue doing what we're doing. If it's a calling, by God, where the right people comes on our path and we write, we write. If it's to shout out when we're on a street corner or wherever, or when it's in a shop where we have to educate people that want to jump a queue because of the color of their skin, we will have to educate. So that's the calling we have. But it touches on what you were saying on why write the book, because it brings us to a chapter in the book, and we're translating a lot of this tonight because the book was written in Afrikaans for Afrikaners, to most extent, but also Christian Afrikaners, so those who largely come from the NG Kerk. So we hope they get to listen and hear this at some point, because those are a big group of people that we need to be part of the conversation in order for us to go anywhere. But part of the book is about building bridges and how our well-being in South Africa are bind together as different groups, racial groups. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I've been in the Cape now for a week, and I was teasing them and saying that they can hide, and they might hide longer than most of the other people in the rest of the country in their pockets. But you can hide, but you can run, but you can't hide forever. And our well-being is linked, although people have been very successful with money to create pockets of safety and think that we can continue on without considering the well-being of our neighbors. And then if it doesn't work out, if you've got money, you go overseas as a white person. And if you don't have a lot of money, you go to the Cape, the Western Cape, and the less money you have, the more you move to PE side. So eventually, what I've even seen this week is older people, their children move away, white people now, and then they don't get to grow up with their grandchildren. And it's sad.
True.
We've been raising kids that's maybe not loyal with the complete buying in the country and all the people of the country. So for me, if I think of my own two kids from a selfish perspective, there's no future for my two white boys with their little white bums if I don't consider the future of black kids of the same age. And
Yeah.
so in a way, I'm selfish, and in a way, I have to be very unselfish to serve my own needs. And I just want to comment on, you use the word bridges. one of the biggest things I had to learn in maybe the past 20 years is my job is not to build bridges and be strong and build stuff. It's to be a bridge. And if you're a bridge, people will walk over you from both sides. If there's not people walking over you from both sides, you have to seriously question if you're a bridge. And it's horrible. It's great, but it's horrible, and it's daily. Having to be in that position of being stamped on, and it's a lifelong commitment. So yeah, I think a lot of our countries in denial, and part of my job is not to say I'm better or different or whatever, but just to keep amplifying. You can't hide from these issues, because white people like to talk only about farm murders. We don't talk about murders in the township. We talk about white farm murders. But every farm murder, we're partly responsible for that if we haven't given everything to invest in a safe, healthy country for all.
Yeah.
So when I see those things on the news, it makes me point the finger at myself, not at black people or the ANC or this or that. I have to look in the mirror and not just firstly for myself, but secondly, Steve Biko said the best thing a white person can do is to go and fix their own tribe. And in a way, that's also why I wrote the book, is it's me and my people who have to step up for the sake of others and for the sake of our own futures.
Yeah. That's a very important point that you are highlighting, because I feel like a lot of the big groups that have come up to defend Afrikaners always defend in opposition to black people. They don't necessarily defend to unify uh, um, uh, all people in South Africa, and I think that's the little difference that is a big point with what you do differently in Betereinders. You always look at your own flaws and looking at fixing you in order to be better, to show up at a table where you engage with black people. And I think that sums it up amazingly. So that's how you become the bridge where both parties can walk over, white to black and black to white. And when we say black, we mean colored, Indian, all disenfranchised groups. We mix them together in one. But that's another important conversation. But you, Schalk, decided that South Africa is not big enough for you to learn, or whether you decided to do it or not. You wanted to be something different, or the world chose you to go into a different path. You ended up in Africa, somewhere in Africa, whether it's I want to say Mozambique, but I know there's other places as well. Although Mozambique is your big drawing card where you have most of your people. What was that? Because there's a chapter that speaks about uh, something of your attitude being between arrogant and pathetic. I like that. Uh, it's a brilliant chapter in the book, uh, and it says a lot about you and your personality. But inside, it speaks about making friends and what type of relationships do you have to build in order to be a genuine white person doing the best kind of making the best type of contributions in order to change South Africa. And 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 while you answer that, I also want to ask you, if we're going to see a change in South Africa, a significant one, do we have to first send all the white people in Cape Town to go to all the African, or the white people in South Africa to all the African countries around us before they can become better for us to use in South Africa?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I'm hearing a slight dissing me there. Like, why the hell did you have to go and find other people? What's wrong with our black people, you know? So, it's, to be very honest, Edwin, when I matriculated in 95. So it was right on the change of everything in the country. So I've got living memory of the old days, although I was a small child. And I grew up in that transition, and we I have jokes, but I'll go to jail if I tell all my jokes. But black people have initiation to become a man. And we grew up thinking, for men at least, you grow up when you go to the army. And when I left school, or when I matriculated, that system was out. It wasn't the norm anymore. So I'm sitting there as an 18-year-old kid, and a big part of my move was where the hell am I going to grow up? Because in army, you grow up because it's difficult, it's different, it's radical. You have to submit. So I didn't go to Mozambique to change Mozambique or just to be a nice guy or to be an evangelist or something. A big part of my motivation was, what's the most difficult thing I can think of to help me to grow up so that my dad can become proud of me? And so I had a good intentions and a love or affinity to the little bit of Mozambicans that I knew, but in a big way, it was adventure, and that's part of my privilege, that and my self-confidence that I can venture into crazy stuff like that. And so that I'm very aware of, if I grew up more difficult, I would never been able to imagine nonsense like this. So I went to grow up because it was an other with all the problems that's associated with that. But the biggest blessing for me was I went alone as a white guy. I didn't go with a few white friends. So in the evenings, I couldn't sit and recap with my white friends in Afrikaans what happened today. It's me and the people of Mozambique. And I couldn't speak Portuguese. So I was literally the dumbest person in town. Now, if you ask me, do all white people have to go elsewhere? It's very useful to put a white person in a place where they can't talk. It's a relief also for most black people, but it was a big part of my journey, not being able to speak. And Zambo is on the call. They charged me double for bread. They charged me triple for haircuts because I was just a fool, not knowing anything. And that had really helped me in Mozambique, different than, for example, Zimbabwe, where you could speak English and still use your power and cleverness through language. So that was a big blessing to reprogram my mind. But then there's also a honesty, and it's not even in the book, but South African whites, we always say, no, South African black people are extra bad and arrogant and issues, but other Africans, they're nice. So if you check, we prefer a Malawian or
Yeah.
a Zimbabwean in our garden, and it's like a safety, like it's a difference. It's not, those are not our blacks, so there's this weird thing. So unapologetically, I'll tell you, it was less scary to go to another country and meet black people there where I didn't do apartheid than in South Africa. In a
Yeah.
way, it's a soft landing, but then there, I discovered so many things about race, myself, black people, that and it healed me in a way. But then after 10 years about when I came back to South Africa and I started working, playing, and being in South African townships, I was scared as hell because that Mozambican experience didn't prepare me for South African situation. There is a difference in communicating, in being. So when I came back, I had to start on zero. I couldn't say, hey, I'm this integrated guy. All my friends are black, blah, blah, blah. I started just like 100% white again when I
Yeah.
came back to South Africa. And I was much more scared and nervous and unsure if I'm welcome in South Africa. Luckily, I got enough clues. So I can say Mozambique for me was a soft landing. And I don't know if other people need that, but I think there's so much diversity in South Africa and so much grace in South Africa that if you can't find a good black community here to learn from, then there's also issues, But I had these weird ideas in my mind as a 20-year-old, and it worked out well. But yeah, I think South Africa is Africa. And one thing I say in my book, which I think is very honest, and I'm yet to find a white person that disagrees, is I say Afrikaners and white people, we're very excited when we see a black rhino. We're very excited when we see that sable. It's in Afrikaans, it's called the swartwitpens. And we're very excited when we see those animals. But we're not that excited when we see a black person. And so we think we love Africa like sunset, the soil, the elephants, the animals. That's Africa we love, the sunshine. But then Africa has millions and millions of black people. Most of us don't love that type of Africa. And that's
Yeah.
when we can't be free ourselves and feel at home and we have to nail that. And it's in a way romantic in other countries, but I think we must just nail it here in South Africa, even if it's scary.
Yeah. No, you make a very good point. One is that you speak about the fear you had when you had to enter our African or areas where most of our black people live, where a lot of white people are very scared to enter, and that's a good point that you're making. Because unfortunately, the only way for you to bridge that fear is actually to engage with those people that live there, um, without only speaking to the ones coming into your house to come and work. That doesn't give you a clear um, understanding of how black people feel about white people and about apartheid. So you will have to do a little bit more than merely having somebody come clean your house to tell you about that story. Because most times, by the way, those people are too fearful to say something negative towards you because they will lose their income. And so the white people say, no, but Tando working here with me loves me, Tando is my favorite. But meanwhile, Tando is thinking, one day is one day I'm gonna murder you. So but that's the reality of our South Africa, and we need to understand that as well.
If you ask white people the views of their domestics and gardeners, you'll think that the DA wins 100% of each election, because the workers always tell the boss that, yeah, no, I'm going to vote DA, I'm going to vote DA. Meantime, they're voting EFF or ANC. But we think that everyone in the country, so when the election results come out, we're like, where did all these votes come from?
And that's the thing we've learned over the years to protect ourselves and to keep the safety of our income, which is important. But you speak about something, and it's related to some extent where we get into this with the book. The chapter in Afrikaans is saamstaan, standing together or sticking together or grouping together. But you tell a story about a black family where that you met, or was forced to meet when you were camping next to each other in the Kruger National Park, which is obviously Kruger National Park. Most white people think it belongs to them. And that's one of their national heritage sites where they go have holiday. The rest of us must just stay away when they're there. But you go in there and you meet a black family. But the interesting is not the story that you tell about that black family in terms of the eye opening for you about black people and how we all basically are the same and we have the same dreams. We bring our children up to be good people, and you have bad people in all racial groups regardless. But what is important for me, which I want to ask a question about, is you describe that family that you were next to as a decent family, a nice family that showed you black people as being decent. And my question is, over and above the family being so decent and giving white people a better view to some extent of what black people are and can be, why is it necessary in South Africa for us as black people to be nice, decent, and everything that white people think we should be before we are good enough to sit around the table with white people? Because it's a critical question to understand. Because if I speak the way I speak when I'm in my ghetto or where I am comfortable with my people on the Cape Flats, where we speak Afrikaans, and then I'm not good enough. So I have to bring my Afrikaans A levels taught to me in apartheid, under the apartheid government. If I don't speak that type of Afrikaans, I'm to some extent not good enough. So why are we always looking at that ones? They not like the other ones. They are better than that other blacks or better than that other color. So why is that?
Like us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very, I don't want to offend or be insensitive to anyone, but I'm going to try and be as blunt as an Afrikaner as I can be. So from your direct question, why should black people? They shouldn't at all. But I'm confessing how my DNA as a white South African worked, and that is our default is that black people are dangerous, savage, bad, whatever. That's like the ingrained. We expect bad things. That's why we're scared. And then the second phase is when we see black people that doesn't meet that idea or that stereotype of ours. And the Kruger example you're giving is one. The other example in my book, which a few black friends have told me offended them, is when I was beaten in a debate by a black person in high school. I went home and I told my parents, black people can be smarter than us, because tonight I met a black guy who kicked my butt in debating. And it was the first time, 17 years old, when I thought black people could be smarter than white people. So it's such an embarrassing sentence to say and to write down. But why I decided to share these things in the book is that is the baby steps or the embarrassment I had to go through to wake up and to clean my mind of my stereotypes. So it's not that, so it's totally wrong. But I had to go through that. And then after those small awakenings that affirmed that black people could be like me, and it took away some of my stupid ideas and prejudice, then after that, I started graduating to further things where I saw how a black person with different English or with Rasta hair or that's loud or whatever that didn't fit my categories are also still decent and smart and amazing. But I wasn't ready to see that from the start. The first part is like where I saw people that mirrored something of my whiteness. And that made me think different of black people. And then only later on, I got to really enjoy black people that's very different and uncomfortable to me even. But so to this day, if I see a black family in the Kruger National Park, I I have to deal with thoughts that firstly think they're going to open the boot of the Polo and play loud music and drink too much and not pick up the beer bottles. So that's still, after all my
Yeah.
life, it's still my fear. And then when they don't do that, I'm like, oh, okay, these are nice ones. So I'm just being raw.
Yeah.
No matter how many times I learn my lessons, I gravitate to the stereotypes, and that's why if I'm struggling with this still every week, that's why I don't believe white people that tell me they don't see color or they don't have these issues. They've moved beyond. They're all just children of God. I can't believe I'm the only person that have to revisit all my issues every time, and I'm still catch myself with my vocab. If I've had a very amazing discussion with a brilliant black person, if I tell the story, I don't say this and this said this. I said this and this black friend of mine was so amazing. He said this. So I add that he or she was
The black
black.
friend. Yeah.
But if it was Tom or Gideon, I'll just say their opinion. I won't say this amazing white person. So
Correct.
so I can get pulled out or whatever. I just know what it is. And if I catch myself, I have to say sorry to myself and to all the parties and and journey along, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's your question was why should black people and unapologetically they shouldn't, and you're supposed to be free. I just know the typical journey of a white person is
Yeah.
embarrassingly slow.
Yeah.
And that was my journey, which I described, my awakenings.
Yeah. But it's good that you highlight that socialization, because I know you, right? And the only reason I'm friends with you is because I respect what you're doing. If I did not respect what you're doing, I wouldn't be friends with you. So let's just put that out there. We are only friends because you are doing the right things. uh, but that being said, you also exposing something that most white people wouldn't tell any of us deliberately and without being paid to do it, which is to say that my socialization forced me to think in this way when I see you. And most times I have to consciously and continuously think about it before I do it. And when I do it, I have to apologize and change it so that I hope that one day at least I can be different and show up proper so that I don't have all of those inequities. But what further is very important about what you just said is the fact that somebody like yourself, who has immersed yourself in this work, continuously still suffer that same struggles where your socialization keeps on showing up when you meet black people, regardless of the context. And yet some people that engage with 10% of what you do in your life think that they can cross that bridge in 2 seconds and then no, it's kumbaya, we are all together. And I like the fact because we'll highlight that for the mere fact that it's critical and important to understand that doing this work is not overnight and it's not a quick fix. It's a journey. Yours have been 40 years going into multiple Black communities, engaging with multiple people so that you could get a better understanding for something that you were brought up to hate, fear, and run the opposite direction when you see it. Now you have to live with it in your communities, around you at your workplaces, and find ways to bridge that gap. And it's important that we share this because I think it's phenomenal when it comes from the people who hold those type of characteristics and beliefs and behaviors and ideologies that we need to change. But it adds to your story about the 5 ways where we can build solid relationships. Um, with people across racial barriers. You have a chapter in the book that looks at that. So I want you to just give one or two um, uh, of those nuggets of gold where you can help others to also build better relationship across racial groups.
I want to just be naughty and privileged. On your last question, I just wanted to add a quick extra example because sometimes we're so abstract in our things that we can't move forward. So when you were speaking about that, what we have to deal with, for most white people, and it's also the case with me, if you put any one Black person in front of me, I'm quite positive, I'm not scared. I actually enjoy for the younger the Black people are, the more we enjoy the company, the more you grow up, the less we enjoy. But what still sometimes surprises me is when I see, and I don't know if it's the same with Black people and white people, but when I see many Black people together in groups, all of a sudden I'm scared.
Yeah.
Like, like still
Yeah.
today, especially if in a place that I'm not used to. The more Black people, it brings out not just the scared, but it brings out all my preconceived
Yeah.
fears.
Yeah.
So one-on-one now, I'm not scared of any Black person. Two, it's still fine. Three, it's fine. But if there's a lot of them, it's okay. But if they start singing, then I start getting very nervous. Um, so there's practical times in my life, and I'm sure for other people, where we realize, well, okay, I can still discover more here or there. Now your question about how to build relationships,
Yeah.
it's very funny because everyone's begging white people to become friends with Black people in the name of reconciliation. And the bad part is that many Black people don't want to be your friend because you're just not a pleasant person. Even white people don't want to be your friend because you're not nice. No, especially think of Dominis. We tell them go and make Black friends, and if they find a Black person in their street, they try and be friends. Doesn't work out. It's not about even Blackness. It's just you are not a nice person. So if you ask me how to build relationships across culture, I must first figure out how to build relationships in my own culture where I'm not an arrogant guy or irritating person.
Yeah.
Where if white people don't enjoy being around me, how the heck are Black people gonna enjoy my friendship? So there's something real and normal about just being a pleasant person or a real honest person. Then the maybe my biggest advice would be people always say these things have to happen naturally, and it won't. If
Yeah.
it happened naturally, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, like when I wanted a wife or a girlfriend, I had to be deliberate and intentional and do stuff to try and get lucky. And so you can differ from me. I don't know. Maybe it will be interesting for you to tell me. But for me, sometimes I'm intentional about which church to go to or which place to hang out or which sport to do. So I'm looking ways to expose myself to many Black people besides the person serving me in my house or in Woolworths or wherever, so that I can have a wide variety of contact with Black people or in the broad sense, and then see where's there's some affinity or magic, and And I normally take a posture of learning and curiosity, asking questions, trying to listen to stories, and then see which one develops in a way that doesn't irritate anyone.
Yeah.
And in that, I learn to have different type of jokes. Like some of my jokes, white people think it's not funny, but black people think it's funny. So over time, I do adapt depending on in which situation I am.
Yeah.
And that's just through exposure. So three things in the book theoretically that I always say is start with respect, then understanding, and then trust. I cannot get to trust without really a deeper understanding of different tribes, different feelings. But before that understanding, I have to discipline myself to a posture of respect when I'm not in a hurry when I meet a black person, where I really focus and see them and with everyone I meet, not just a few that I want to impress. So that respect, understanding, trust, that's kind of for me a typical cycle. And the understanding one, I like to give practical examples. I've got black friends that's very appreciative if I'm apologetic or even straight up say sorry for apartheid. And the more they hear it, the more it brings comfort to them. And even sometimes for myself, sometimes on behalf of all whites or whatever.
Yeah.
But that type of thing to be helpful, my posture of humility. But then I've got other black friends that says, dude, please, I don't want an apology from you. Let's get real and move forward. Can you lend me money? But so as I respect and know individual black people, I also discover that black people don't feel the same about every topic. And because one black friend told me he don't want an apology for apartheid, it doesn't mean, okay, I'm free now. I can
Yeah.
treat all black people in that way. So I think I have a very heightened sensitivity to try and see and hear. And that comes out of respect. Each person in front of me, not just as a black person, but as a human. I don't know
Yeah.
if it helps towards your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely makes sense. But I think what you also highlight in your response, which brings me to another part in the book that you discuss, that I like to speak to, because you say respect, understanding, and what's the third one? Um,
Trust.
Trust. Now, I also know that when we build relationships across race, there are some times when you engage with people who are not really at the same point as you are. So the engagement might be different. So I like a story you told, and I'm just going to cut to the chase of the story where you are at this party with these very wealthy soccer players, and one of the guys step up to you, and you become the face of apartheid, and he just tells you where to get off in terms of you white people and who you white people are to black people and your contribution to all his hate that he's holding. But then you make a statement in the book that hits me because I love hearing what you said about that experience. So you can speak a little bit to the experience when it happened, but I think the most critical part about that story for me was the fact that you said your ears were hurting hearing what you were hearing from him, but your heart was healing. And I think that is so powerful for me, and it shapes this idea where white people always listen to respond, because white people have many opinions and they always have something to say. You listen to any of these big groups that have been developed over years to defend white people and white Afrikaner ideology. They always have 10,000 excuses and uh, comebacks when they're in a position where they are being challenged about the past. But you say, rather keep quiet, even though it hurts whatever you are hearing. But through allowing that person to get all of that out, your heart is healing. So I'm a bit even angry at the fact that you getting something out of that, something positive, because I'm trying to beat you with a stick,
Yeah,
and inside you are saying, "Thank you, Jesus." Talk to
yeah,
me about that.
As white people, we can't win. What was funny about that evening is it was like EFF type of people who intervened and told this guy, ah, bro, it's too much now. Chill, stay back. So he was beyond PAC, whatever. He was next level. And I must say, I think if it maybe that day it was really God who put me there, because I think if this happened to 99.999% of white people, they would have had very big issues after that, because we get hurt when we see Malema on TV calling our fathers land thieves, and I'm like, oh, my dad worked hard, so I'm
Yeah,
upset.
yeah,
That wasn't even that was just on TV, and it was one sentence. So to have hundreds of that from a big strong guy like shouting down at you, that was very it wasn't easy for me. So my ears were really hurt. Luckily, I've been on the journey, and I started realizing when I see people talk against whiteness, it means different things than just Schalk. So I could process some of it. What was hilarious is he's a millionaire, this guy. So while he was insulting me, he was subconsciously filling my wine and his wine the whole time. And that was actually the thing that saved my head, because I was hearing him and it was felt bad. And when I spotted that he's still filling my wine glass while telling me I must F off to Europe, yet I'm getting the wine. So again, I got privileged. I'm getting expensive wine while I'm being insulted. But that was actually the symbol that saved me that night. Um, and the sentence I wrote in the book was, I could hear him despite his words. And in him, I was hearing the stories and frustrations of many of my black friends who've been treated very rudely by white people. And so as he was giving me this personal beating, I can say, I was okay, luckily, that day, not to want to respond, not to defend, but really just to take it. And as a Christian, that feels so appropriate, just to be able to take it. Yeah, so that was a big moment for me in my life. And since then, I often get that. That's why, one is scared as a white person to come on a Zoom with Edwin Klupas, because you might also hit us with your stick. But that's why I will say, yes, I'm going to come, and whatever happens, it's for the greater good, because I didn't come here to get compliments from you. I came here to
yeah,
hear the truth, the untold truth.
yeah,
And that's part of my journey. And it's not, as Afrikaners feel so victimized. We've turned around victimhood, where we feel victimized, and then we have slogans like "Slaan terug, hit back," or "Enough is enough." So we want to hit back. But I think if we're really strong enough, and we can take a lot and be relaxed and be calm towards a new type of humanity, and that's rare out there in the country at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
It's always polarizing. It's always wanting to fight. It's always rather wanting to be right and win the argument than to win the friend.
yeah,
It's not short-sighted. So even if tonight we get start arguing and get angry at each other, my goal is not to win the debate with you. My goal is to learn from you and to become your friend over the next 20 years. And that makes me speak and listen differently. So I'm glad I had that story and that I could share it.
yeah. Wonderful. Well, it's a brilliant story. And I think the punchline is even better because I think more white people should listen more and talk less. And then there would be better opportunities created for us to uh, um, bond and build better friendships across racial groups. But I'm now going to jump out of the book and I'm going to jump into Cape Town, where I want you to answer some questions because you've been on a book tour in the Western Cape where you were seeing a lot of white people, especially in churches and so forth, where you were discussing the book and obviously the work that you do. So one, this is a multiple question, and if you don't get it all, I will come back until you answer all of it. But we'll start off by you have to tell me what's wrong with people, white people in Cape Town, because it feels to me like Cape Town white people are just a little bit different than other white people in the country. It feels like you have to treat them a little bit more gentler. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. So I don't know if that is a thing, but you will know because you've been here now. Um, And then after that, I want us to speak about white work, witwerk. Um, who is supposed to do this work? How is it supposed to be done? And is there and has there been enough work done in and amongst white people that they can continue the work without black people being almost the safety switch in those conversations to make sure that whatever is being done actually contributes to this idea of reconciliation that we're still striving towards. So very loaded questions there.
Yeah. So I've been drinking their wine the whole week, so I don't want to throw them under the bus now. Um, I'll tell you what I've heard 3 times out of the mouth of Cape Townians is that white people in Bloemfontein they say the wrong thing, but they do the right thing. And Cape Townians say the right thing, but they do the wrong thing, or they say the right thing, but they do nothing. So I'm not judging everyone. I'm just saying this is what I'm hearing from them. And then
Yeah.
that made me feel very bad because in a world where they all say the right thing and talk too much, I'm yet talking more about my book, and now they can quote Schalk, and it could be just a little bubble of intellectual masturbation that didn't help anything. So even up to where I'm sitting here now, I don't know if I should have been here, if it helped or if it didn't help or whatever. So Cape Townian whites, all whites have problems. Now, obviously, I'm the first guy to say that. But if I can make a link, in Mozambique, where there was just Portuguese, I was very insecure and I had to be more respectful because I didn't feel naturally at home. And I think in the Cape, because of Afrikaans, firstly, people feel like this is my place. And black people are like in my space in the Cape. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. That's just my perception. Like they have a natural type of ownership. Like this is their place. The roads look nice. The DA is in charge. They just have to somehow figure out with Kailicha and so on, which is annoying them. So that's the sense they look to me like they feel very at home here. And in the rest of the country, I think we've woken up to the fact that we are a minority and in a way we guests in Africa. And there's a bigger South Africa where we have to learn to fit into other people's way of doing things. And we still in Joburg will make big estates where you can go from birth to death and not escape your bubble. But this bubble just looks bigger. And I think that might be why some Cape Townians, although they're very nice people, they don't feel as unrooted as that other parts of the country white people are experiencing. And maybe that's why they are coming across as more arrogant and less careful because they're like, ek is nog die baas hierso.
Yes, yes.
That's I'm guessing because I don't know the place, so it's difficult. I'm not judging. I'm just giving a perception. Also, in my life, how I feel different in different places, and I think it's a helpful metaphor for a white person to think of ourselves as guests. Even if my people have been here for 300 years, I still find it helpful to view myself as a guest. And if I behave like a good guest with good manners, I can be welcomed very much to the point of brotherhood. But it's because I'm behaving as, in my mind, as a pilgrim or a guest. And in a Christian perspective, maybe we're guests on earth, all of us. Yeah, so that might be a point to explore for Cape Townians.
Yeah.
That was one. White work is when white people by themselves talk about all these issues because when we ask really stupid questions, we don't offend and hurt black people unnecessary. So there's one or two things we can sort out by ourselves before we throw that burden on black people. So that's how I understand white work is in the comfort of my own skin color and language. We sharpen ourselves a little bit, preparing us for the real conversation that's waiting for us. And that's helpful because it brings less distraction into the room
Yeah.
when we meet other people, because often black people will say, you guys are lazy, you haven't done the work.
Yeah.
That work is an attempt to do some of the work, But where it's gone quickly wrong is white work can become a end in itself, where white people now talk about apartheid and racism among ourselves, like I've done this week, and that's where it ends.
Yeah.
And when white work ends with white work and doesn't translate over to real talk, where it's now white and black people speaking together and white people moving over to actually sharing resources, doing the hard work of everything. We call it werksaam, but it includes even things like restitution and radical. I'll joke even and say dismantling white monopoly capital. If it didn't end up there, then our white work has been fake, and that can quickly happen. So I prefer an idea of speaking a little bit with white people, then jumping into the real world, and maybe coming back again saying, "Yo, I think I messed up," and then we check in again, and then we go in. So if it's a like a concertina the whole time, I think white works better than thinking it's like 2 retreats and 3 workshops, and then I'm an expert in white work as a thing in itself. So yeah, that's so white work is just when whites only are in a chat, and I don't know when Robin DeAngelo last month mentioned to you affinity groups or something
Yes.
like this. I wondered if it's something similar that they're trying to do,
Yeah.
but I don't know what she does. But
Yeah.
we here in South Africa call it witwerk, white work, where we're
Yeah.
gonna make
Affinity groups
devices
and
to keep white people together first.
yeah, so affinity groups with D'Angelo is similar. But again, when she does it, there's black facilitators
Oh,
that is part of the conversation, and
oh,
the concept behind some of that is to hold the conversation accountable. And it's a difficult thing to do because, like you said, white people, there's a comfortableness when you're discussing those things when it's only white people. But the problem is, like you also mentioned, and we've seen it with pretty much a lot of the, especially the church groups, where there is a sense of comfort, where the white work becomes the end goal, and it's about being in that group and having opportunities to go out and work and get together and kayerkies and camps and whatever. And they feel very chuffed about what they're doing and they give each other pats on the back, but it doesn't translate into the transformation and reconciliation of the country that
oh,
we desperately need, you know?
I'll make a confession again. Because we're only white people in the room and not having a black facilitator, one of the dangers, and it happens to me because of the way I've lived, is you'll get 1 or 2 white people in the room starting to represent blackness and telling the other whites, yeah, white, black people, what,
Yeah.
and put themselves in the teacher because they're further along the way.
Yeah.
And so it's very important for me as Schalk, for example, if I speak with white people in white work, to position myself with them as I'm one of the ones with issues, and I'm fully part of the problem, and not because it's a very deceptive temptation is when you know a little bit more than other white people to like, and white liberals like doing that. They
Yeah.
like speaking on behalf of black people and well, I'm not allowed to swear, but pooping on other whites as if they the this great black freedom fighter. So
Yeah.
that's when you started me saying, "Are you a whitey?" I have to say yes.
I knew somewhere down the conversation the penny's gonna drop. So if you just joined us or you jumping in and out, my guest tonight is Schalk van Heerden. He's a Betereinder. He wrote the book Be the Difference, Wees die Verskil. And we're discussing some of this and a lot of what is currently happening in South Africa in the transformation social justice space. And we're hoping that through this conversation, we can birth a really a nation of people willing to do the difficult work so that we get to the great work of just being in each other's company without the past always taking up most of the space because we don't trust based on our history. But I'm jumping a few of the questions. Time is quickly running out. We have 1 hour for these conversations. The 1 hour is already done. But we decided that tonight we're going to throw in an extra half an hour because it is so important, and Schalk has left us with so many brilliant stories in this book that we couldn't just give it 1 hour. So that's why we're going on a little bit later tonight. But that being said, Schalk, you were mentioning when you were talking about witwerk, white work, you mentioned reparations. And that is a swear word in South Africa. Reparations is very closely linked to land redistribution without compensation. You know, when white people hear that, it is the basis for all reverse apartheidism in this country. When we people of color are now trying to take all their hard-earned belongings, and they can't see the concept behind that, that everything that they own started with theft. Like you said, some white people are very offended when you say that. They might be tonight as well, but I don't think we really care about that. But something that has been built from theft, murder, rape, and the demolition of people's culture, language, and who they were, taking away their identity, their belonging, is now a well-oiled machine that is securing white supremacy and white privilege. So I'm coming with a long drop story to reparations, but I want to link it to the story in the book. So I wish I had known you, Schalk, much earlier in your life, because I think at some point in your life, you were Oprah Winfrey, because you were just giving away cars and motorbikes. Um, and the chapter in the book is called the price of price. So Skulk in that chapter is telling about all the many cars and motorbikes that he gave away to people. So I wish I had known him then, because I could have really done at that time with one of those buckies you were giving away. But that is a great symbol for me, because one of the stories, although that's not where the question is going, when you were gifted a 38,000 rand bucky for 4,000 rand, and that whole concept of getting all those things speaks to me about white privilege, white supremacy, and that bond of white solidarity where white people take care of each other more so than they would do for people of color, or even care for people of color. So in that chapter, where you speak about this receiving and giving, and how money shouldn't be the all else of your being, but how money is also the critical part of being in this world to bless others. How do you think about those moments in your life, that stories as well that you tell, and how does it link to reparations? Because uh, majority of the black people, regardless of the corruption in this country, are still disenfranchised, living in poverty, largely still because of the remnants of apartheid, whether we like it or not, and also living off the intergenerational wealth and gains that came from colonialism and apartheid. So speak to reparations and how you once were Oprah and now cannot do that anymore when we became friends.
Um, yeah, now I'm poor. Yeah, I've got a few things at the same time. I'm thinking, Edwin, and in a way, my book feels like a compromise because I'm using different language, which is actually softer language. So the words, like if someone just joined now in the last 2 minutes, white people, they would have freaked out and switched off the thing because here's a black person telling us about reparations and theft and rape and the blah. So there we get very worked up. What I think at some stage for pragmatism, not for to be correct abstractly, theoretically, for pragmatism, I'm willing to change words if it can lead to material benefit of people who's living, for example, in undignified poverty. So besides like wanting to tell someone why the word restitution or reparations is the correct term to use, I'll rather use a different word if that's going to get that person to open their wallet or give a bit of their land or something like this. So we lose a sense of we're telling them that we lose a bit of the fire, but at the end of the day, it doesn't help for me to be in a debate, but nothing moves at the end. So if I really want to measure my success of engagement in the material difference it makes for people that's stuck in poverty, then I'm willing to compromise on words and not be difficult. So at Betereinders, I use the words restitution first. And then after that, I even use the word justice, gerechtigheid. And that still triggered people. And gerechtigheid is the whole Bible is full of it. And still Christians don't like it. And then I went and I used the word werksaam. And then they were all happy to do reparations and restitution because I called it werksaam, work together. And that kind of and the trick in it, and I don't know, you can tell me if it's BS. If I'd make a white person feel like a pig, I won't get the best out of them. But if I tell them, listen, you belong in Africa, you're welcome, we need you, let's do this, let's fix this country, let's work together, let's eliminate undignified poverty, then they kind of inclined to share their wealth in a big way. Like chunks, I'm not talking about 2 rand at the robot. I'm talking about something that will be taken away from their own children, that affects where they go on holidays.
Yeah.
Like real, I'm not talking about cuteness. So I'm happy to compromise on words to get a better result. And that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm doing with the book. And some of my radical friends don't like that I don't use the radical words. And I'm willing to say it might be wrong because it also irritates Black people if now white people are acting out of their goodness and Messiah and we're so nice, that's why we're helping poor people. It has a different feel to it, like pay back what you stole. So, but I've been trapped in that debate for too long, and all the thousands of poor people I know don't benefit from that debate.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. Many white people say, oh, I'm already paying tax. Like I'm paying 40% tax.
Yeah.
And they see that as their restitution or their contribution, but then Black people also pay tax.
Yeah.
So it's weird for me, where I do think white people have a unique responsibility to fix the things that we were responsible for, but to break. I don't want to talk about to which extent my great-great-grandfather stole the land or negotiated the land or found open land, all those debates. I want to be real about, if you have something now, you have responsibility, not out of cuteness, but out of justice, to be fair in this country. And the fact that my kid grows up in one way and a million other kids don't grow up that way, it's unfair. And I have to do something about it as a imperative, for the sake of my own integrity. I have to share as much as I can. And it's never enough, I guess. But yeah, so my idea, what I'm throwing back to you, Edwin, is using softer words to get a harder result. Is that being a coward or pragmatist? I'm still literally not sure.
Yeah.
But I'm trying everything.
Yeah. Well, I will give you an example of a group that I am part of, and I won't say too much about the content of this group for obvious reasons. I didn't get permission to share who they are and what we do, but for those who are part of it will know. But we had a long debate and fight because it is an official structure. Um, and this structure, we are forcing them to enact transformation within the space that they function. And we wanted to call that group the Transformation Committee. But this group of white people did not want transformation to be called the Transformation Group. So long story short, we went months on going around the table, going up against each other to call it Transformation Committee, or wait for it. The other name that they were more comfortable with was the Sensitivity Committee. So long story short, after months of going back and forth and fighting around the table, I just said one day, okay, forget about the transformation committee. We are now officially, I am endorsing it. We are the sensitivity committee. So that has been our name for the last couple of months. But what I can tell you is a lot of the work and things that we wanted to have done has been coming along nicely because we moved past that one thing that people just couldn't get past. So I am in agreement with you. I think we shouldn't uh, beat around the bush about these things. And although we want it our way, sometimes we're gonna have to give some to get some. And if that is some of the things like the wording, if it's possible, we have to do it. But I want to add, I like the fact that you say there's a lot of white people. If we change the narrative or the approach, they will gladly come with their open wallets and whatever we need. I hope that those white people hear our conversation tonight and that they search for me on Facebook, Twitter, and the internet and come with me with their open wallets. Because I'll take the money to change the country any day. And I'll make them my best friend and I'll post videos about our love for each other any day.
Um, sorry, Edwin, I just want to put something because I think you and I understand each other, but I think some people don't understand. Um, if we, if black people accommodate me by using nice words and not saying diversity or transformation or whatever irritates me, and they're using nice words to accommodate me, some things I can decide out of my own goodness and planning and budget to do stuff. But the test of your heart and your character is when it doesn't suit you and it doesn't fit your idea to submit to someone else. So let's say we're having a workshop talking about this, and you're making a joke now, but let's say you really say, listen, I need 2,000 Rand now for my kid hospital, or for the crash wants to kick me out. I need 2,000 now, or I need 1,000 for the next 6 months. And then if you're really sincere, it's gonna hit your wallet in a way that's not nice for you. We don't give off our abundance or blessings or nonsense like that. My giving must hurt me
Yeah,
if I'm really in the game. And if it doesn't hurt me, then I must ask myself serious questions. If I'm just playing with words. And that's why I've got a chapter unapologetically saying, those with money, give money. Those with cars, give cars, lend cars. Those with houses, give houses, open houses. Those with holiday homes, share holiday homes. And if that's um, yesterday I met someone who owns a wine farm, so maybe I must put him in touch with you.
connect me, please connect me to these people. I love those type of people.
No, so I'm just saying this as a
Yeah,
white person that's not very rich, but if my radical, I have a quote that I say, Jesus will always ask more than malema. And if you look at the Bible with Acts 2 and this, it's more radical than EFF. So I just want to tell my fellow white friends, whether you're rich or not rich, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to kill mammon with generosity and not to be happy about it or want to thank you or be congratulated. You just give because you have to.
yeah,
Um, that's it's a very important point in all of these things. Not to trick ourselves. If it doesn't
yeah.
touch my budget and my time and my money, then I'm wasting someone's time.
Yeah. And time is the one thing that we don't have, and hours are running out very quickly. So let me jump on to the next question. I think that was brilliant, how you phrase all of that, and it speaks to the heart of those who we still not understanding how you need to show up, with that which you hold as resources and opportunity, which most black people lack heavily in this country. So I think that's also important conversation. We're gonna jump to another conversation that you touch on in the book, where you speak about this phrase that everybody likes to throw around. It has multi versions that people use in this country, but the bottom line is teach a man to fish. And then at the end of the day, you have saved a life, and many white people live by that. where they will teach you how to fish by giving you 6,000 rand that first month, but please don't come back again. With that 6,000 rand that I gave you, you need to buy a house, a car, set up a business. You need to send your children to school. And please, at the end of the day, you can recognize me for what I've done for you. But if you come back for another 6,000, this friendship is over. So talk about this teacher man to fish thing, because I like the way you discussed it in the book.
Yeah, I hate, and every white person, every week I get told this story, somehow thinking I've never heard it. They tell me fresh, like it's their own story. So it's literally the thing I hate the most in life is white people telling me, Schalk, don't give a man a fish. You'll feed him for a day, but teach him to fish. You'll feed him for a lifetime. And I'm so sick of it because it's a very arrogant situation. And I learned it the hard way. Again, at my own embarrassment, I've done everything wrong, Edwin. So my dad was a farmer. So I went to Mozambique thinking I'm going to teach them how to farm. And when I arrived there with my few bags of seed and shovel and what, um, it took me 2 months to realize these are master farmers, better than my dad, because with less resources they produce more. And Shoprite in the town there was importing veggies from the Cape, 3,000 kilometers. And they didn't buy from the locals, which were producing much better, much cheaper veggies. And the end of the day, the only role I could play in my big agricultural outreach was I could just be the link to the white Shoprite owner, showing him the local farmers with the amazing produce. And the first few transactions, I was there helping them to sell to Shoprite. And then after a month or so, I wasn't needed anymore. And they kept buying from the local farmers who they learned to trust. So I learned that fishing one, the embarrassing way, seeing Mozambicans can farm better than me. So the myth of me teaching them how to farm and teaching them, they normally people, they've built our houses, they've cooked our food, they've fixed our cars, they know everything. So, but people, I don't know where we get stuck on this funny fish story, where if you don't have a permit, you don't have a vehicle, you're not welcome at the dam, people look at you funny. There's very real obstacles in the life of many Black people that they've told me different examples. And those are the things to help flatten out, which might link to networks and blah, blah, blah. So white people can play a very big role in economic empowerment of poor Black people, but it's not a simple story about giving some skills. Skills you can give, but you can also learn skills and learn to fish from Black people. So I think that's just a simplistic story, which I wish every person would stop telling.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I like the fact that you highlight that, but in the book, I want to say that if we do have some time and you want to ask a question, you can drop it in the comment section, and we'll see if we can get a moment to at least answer those one or two questions.
I have a
Hey,
I have a question that's burning, but I'll wait.
no, you can ask. Ask any question before I get to your next one. Speak to me.
When you read my book or the book, where in the book were you offended or angry or irritated by me?
Yeah, I think if I were to answer that question, I think when I read the book, one thing that hits me every time is your privilege is still very clear to me in that book, and it that irritates me a bit, because even though you go into very difficult situations, your white skin crossing boundaries and borders, going into unknown situations where it should have been detrimental to you. Your white skin saves you every single time. So I think that is one of the things, as I went through some of the chapters, that irritated me to some extent, because while you're trying to educate um, a group of white people, even in the midst of educating them, your privilege shines through all of these pages. And I think that is something that irritates me, because And the reason why it irritates me and gives me that sense of frustration is because of that fact that as a white person, you do not even understand the depth of privilege that you have to have been able to do that. You speak about it, but I mean, do you actually get what that means for a person like myself who would have loved to have been in that position, to have been open to getting some of the resources, the opportunities that you got? So, and it's not sour grapes. I don't look at you with sour grapes like, yeah, I also want that. It's not like I'm longing for that part, but I'm just thinking, I wish I could have lived or be brought up in a world where I could also have had those opportunities, because then I probably wouldn't have had to go and study and do everything that I did over the last 10 years to become relevant. And I think that for me, overall, your book and your conversation, and also I've read a thesis recently um, of a white person who writing on whiteness. And even though they're trying to be as open, genuine, and direct in addressing the issue, I always read the defense of whiteness in those passages where you don't deliberately do it, but you still stay connected to that white audience so that they don't completely reject you.
Mm.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is what I pick up.
But listen, I once said this sentence, and it was only a year ago, so it's not like I'm old and wise. A year ago, I spoke to a black friend, and I said to him, my privilege is between my ears. How my parents loved me, read to me, taught me, and what I meant with it was the way I think and operate, and my character
Yeah,
and my ingenuity. I said that's my privilege is between my ears. And I said the example, which was very arrogant. I said, you can drop me in any African village in the continent where no one knows me, where there's just black people. And I said, I'll make it to the top because of my privilege in my head, not my, I didn't inherit, my dad's not rich, but my privilege is in my, I said between my ears. And
yeah,
my black friend told me, listen, this is nonsense. It's you make a success there because the people will still look at you as a white person. They won't be judgmental. They'll immediately expect something good of you. And that's why if we drop you with nothing, you'll end up at the top because you're white, not because you're so clever as you think you are. And then I changed my
yeah,
sentence, saying my privilege is between my two white ears. It's not just in what's between my ears, it's between two white ears, which gives me the benefit of the doubt. And it's so important that I'm going to just add a sentence. When white people hear the word privilege, we get very weird and uncomfortable. And I can
yeah,
never get rid of my privilege. And it's not even the idea. But I can be humble and understand that where I get the benefit of the doubt mostly, even among black people, you, Edwin, have a harder job than me.
yeah,
And the privilege conversation, I think if there's white people watching, the first thing to just ask us is a bit of humility and understanding, and then a lifelong commitment to make sure we all get the same benefit of the doubt
yeah.
when we're in different situations. So I'm not going to start now feeling weird and defensive about my privilege. I can't hide it unless I chop off my white ears. And you know, so that was a long journey for me,
Yeah.
how to deal with that uncomfortableness. And when even when you say it now, I know like I don't have an answer or a solution. It is what it is, and it's not good. But I must figure out what's my role in that privilege. So it doesn't even help. I apologize for anything. But it
No,
is good for me to hear
yeah,
how we sound and how we come over often, even
yeah,
if we try our best.
yeah. And I think that's what I like is between you and me, whenever we engage and connect, you always ask me to give you the bare minimum, which is honesty in how I see this play out. And I respect you because very few people are willing to continue this conversation with me in the anti-racism transformation space, because I speak very direct, open, and I don't take nonsense, because transformation is not a possibility it's an expectation that I have of all people. You will commit to that process, or we will exclude you at some point. So you always come back to this conversation, and I can pull out a long list of white people who have come to the conversation, but they have never ever returned. In fact, those friendships was never friendships. It was just people I met along the way. And so it's a reality. So you are one of a very few people. I have a few others in my life that I hold very close and dear to me. But those are white people who have continued the conversation, and I love being in connection with them. But and they do some of the things that you also said white people should do, by the commitment to give of that what you have, give what you don't have, so that it feels in your pockets, but it helps black people in a different way, and opening holiday homes and that. So if more white people can do those things, very specifically, it changes the landscape of what we are doing. But I wanted to highlight the other aspect of what you spoke about in what you did in Mozambique for those local farmers, because even when you realize that your clever idea of being the super whitey coming here to teach them how to farm, when you realize that was not what you dared to do, you used your white skin to open doors for them, and you walked away without expectation. Now, I wish I could teach that to white people in this conversation, because whenever white people steps up to the plate to assist people of color, there's always an expectation for some reward. And I think even we keep on referring back to Christianity, because the book also based on your Christian walk with Christ, and your life as a Christian, and a believer. So we have to bring back to that, where Jesus gave without expectation. And so if we imitate, we have to do similar. But I feel like white people, whenever they do something, there's a big expectation. And so when you did that, I think that's a beautiful example of how you just use your whiteness to open doors and create your resources and opportunities. And once that flourish, you can still have a look over, but I mean, walk away, because there's no expectation of you. Because that speaks again to your white supremacy thinking, that without you, nothing can go well. So now
Yeah,
you have to be the
yeah.
oversight. Black people can't do anything right, so I have to stick around. Luckily, you don't think that way, because otherwise you will have to police all the potholes, gatvolle wat julle gatvol gemaak het. But yeah, there's no question in there. It was merely a statement. We are in our final 3 minutes, and I'm going to end off this conversation tonight by saying thank you to everyone that signed in and that came to this conversation. The next one is on on that side, 400 years of the Holocaust, where we're speaking to Dante King. So please come back and come and have a listen, because the interviews are getting um, better and better as we go along. Although it will be very difficult to top tonight, but please come back for more. Scout, thank you for your time, and I will leave you with one last question to answer for us before we both say goodbye. Um, uh, make space for the taxis. Now, we hate taxi drivers in South Africa. They are the most irritated species on our roads, but for some reason, you like to touch us where we don't want to be touched. And then you throw in this idea that make space for the taxi drivers. Tell us about that, and we'll end off with Schalk telling us about making space for the taxis.
Yeah. So firstly, there's a Bible verse where Jesus tells us not just don't love your neighbor, love your enemies. And I had to be honest. Sometimes we're so polite. No, I don't have any enemies. We have to be real about who's our enemies. It can be the EFF or taxi drivers or Zuma or whatever. And then the Bible tells us, love your enemy. And the taxi drivers, and for me, I'll speak for myself, is not just a person driving badly. For me as a white person, a taxi symbolizes everything I hate and fear about blackness. No law and order, a lot of black people. So for me, a taxi in South Africa has a color, and it makes me more emotional beyond just bad driving. So I figured if I can learn in my heart to love a taxi and to learn a rhythm of respect, understanding, and trust with a taxi, It's possible everywhere with my mother-in-law, with my with anything, different churches. So for me, it's like the hardest one, and I plunged in there to fight that. And some weeks I win, and some weeks I don't. But that's for me the battleground, which can rewire my mind out of arrogance and towards togetherness with the taxi driver. So thanks for reminding me.
That's a good place to end it off. You were here to hear the untold truth told to you by Schalk van Heerden with Betereinder, how to make a difference. Thank you again. Schalk, thank you for your time. All the best with the work down there in Joburg. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everyone that's always supporting us in this journey. Enjoy the rest of the Freedom Day, and we'll see you again soon.